I'm on a quest to beat and rate every single PlayStation 2 RPG, TRPG, action RPG, and everything in between. That's over 160 titles. After I beat a game, I'll be making a video where I go through the 10 things I liked and 10 things I did not like in my playthrough. I'll also be giving each game an overall rating and comparing it to the other completed titles. If you want to see my full playthrough, check out my second channel, Low Cloud Aim Gameplay. Now let's get started.
Made in heaven.
Let's get this out of the way quick. Shadow Hearts is easily the best game I've played for the challenge so far, and in my opinion, ranks up there with the best the PlayStation 2 has to offer. I was surprised at just how fantastic this game is, considering it came out towards the beginning of the PS2's life cycle. Shadow Hearts is a turn-based RPG created by the team that made Koldelka on the PS1. I really appreciate you being here today to watch the video, so let's get started with the 10 things I liked and 10 things I did not like about Shadow Hearts. Dislike number 10. This is a short game. My playthrough of Shadow Hearts clocked in at about 20 hours. If I had pursued all the content in the game, I probably could have dragged that out for about 5 more. In my opinion, this is not a negative. I love RPGs that pack in their content into a shorter experience, as long as that experience is high quality. I mentioned this in my Stella Deus review, but sometimes, to drag out the length of a game, there will be filler content thrown in by the developers. Shadow Hearts has no such content, but I threw this in as a dislike for 2 reasons. 1, I wouldn't mind spending more time in this world, and 2, some players might not like that it doesn't hit the standard 40 hours of most RPGs. Like number 10, the pacing. Though shorter, Shadow Hearts never slows down. The game kicks off with a battle atop a train, followed by captivity by a village of cannibals, a bombing in France, and an airplane escape into a spooky fishing village with a bloodthirsty, revengeful ghost. I could go on. While playing, hours would pass without me even knowing. Coming off the puzzle quest experience where every minute felt like an hour, playing Shadow Hearts, every hour felt like a minute. It's rare that an RPG doesn't have at least one section where it drags, or where the plot comes to a screeching halt to make room for side content. How Shadow Hearts remedies this is it pretty much waits until the end to throw out additional content. All of it contained in little bite-sized dungeons or quest threads. For the most part, this works great aside from my number 1 dislike of this game, but we'll get there. Dislike number 9. Stage battle or real? During your first hour of play, you engage in battles that are staged battles, meaning that you're supposed to lose. The first is with Roger Bacon, the main antagonist, who has you attack a few times before he does a wiping spell that takes you out. If you didn't realize this was staged, you might have used a healing item or 2, or even tried fusion. But in the end, the game taught you that it was a waste of time. The second main battle you're in also happens to be a staged battle you're meant to lose. This one is with Yuri's masked father. This battle strings you along a little further than the Roger Bacon fight before finally creaming you. Now, the game here, without realizing it, is teaching you something. If you fall into a unique battle, usually just containing Yuri, and it's against an obviously big boss, it's most likely a staged battle. There are a few more like this throughout the game, such as your first battle with Wugui. Why this landed on my dislike list is this specific moment where, after a long, arduous battle against Yuri himself, which at this point was one of the hardest battles in the game as you're missing your main party member, Yuri. Anyway, after that, you are thrown into the graveyard and another battle with Yuri's father. This battle feels almost identical to the one at the beginning, and when he pulled out an attack that brings Yuri's HP down to 1, I thought, alright, looks like this is going to be a stage battle. So rather than waste a precious healing item, I let him kill me. So now I have to restart my entire battle with Yuri. This of course is very small, like most of the dislikes, but it is a dislike either way. If you're going to spend time teaching the players something in the game and then contradict yourself later, at least make sure there's a save point nearby. Like number 9. Yasunori Mitsuda's score contribution. The score for Shadow Hearts was mainly composed by Yoshitaka Hirota, who did a respectable job. But this game's soundtrack is immensely complemented by the talents of Yasunori Mitsuda. Though he only did a few pieces, the composer of masterpieces like Chrono Trigger and Xenoblade Chronicles contributed some of the most memorable pieces of music to this game. The three standouts for me were Rice Field of Light, then we have Coffin Fetish, and the greatest song in the entire game, See High Noon Fish. Yoshitaka Hirota's additions to the score are hit or miss for the most part, though a special shout out needs to go to the track Call Back from Jesus. Dislike number 8, the battle theme. Like I just said, the score of Shadow Hearts, especially the pieces composed by Yoshitaka Hirota, are hit or miss, but none of them are as bad as Brain Hopper, arguably the piece of music that you'll be listening to the most during your playthrough since it's the battle theme. I think I get what Hirota was going for here. This is a horror game, and unsettling music adds to the atmosphere. But not this. I think the greatest offender is the synthetic chanting. If this had been an actual voice sample with all its complexity, then I maybe could have given it a pass. But not here. It's a shame that Mitsuda didn't give us the battle theme, as I think it would have been better served in his hands. I mean, replace Brain Hopper with Xenogears Dark Daybreak, and you'll see what I mean. Like number 8, Shadow Hearts is funny. You know, for a game that is steeped in demonic, bloody visuals and unsettling music, Shadow Hearts managed to make me laugh out loud. Yuri, the protagonist, has an aimless confidence in most situations. There's this part where the Japanese army captures a defective commander who's been helping our main party. After a derisive conversation with the Japanese general in charge of retrieving her, Yuri strolls into the hotel room. The Japanese general asks who he is, and he gives an evil chuckle before saying, "Your worst nightmare, buddy." What a boss. Another moment is in the halfway point of the game. An evil warlock unleashes the power of a sealed god demon thingy, and all hell breaks loose, literally. Roger Bacon is there observing it all, reveling in the event and speaking in his excited evil tone when this happens.
I believe I shall return to London and have myself a spot of tea. Well then, ta-ta everyone. If you survive, I hope you'll come and pay me a visit there someday. Don't!
I couldn't believe that the devs had the balls to disrupt such a pinnacle moment in the game with Three Stooges style slapstick humor, and I am here for it. Dislike number 7. Failure is heavily punished. I think one of the hardest parts of Shadow Hearts is that it's stuck between being an innovative title, introducing breakthrough gameplay mechanics to the turn-based RPG genre, while also playing with completely outdated ideas. One of these is heavily punishing mistakes. Now, this isn't as bad as, say, a game like Ninja Gaiden, where if not played flawlessly, you pretty much start the game over. No, it doesn't go that far, which is why it's low on my dislike list. But there are severe consequences when it comes to failing here, especially when it comes to the Judgement Ring. The Judgement Ring is the mechanic used for both in-battle and out-of-battle events. It decides the outcomes of these events by how well you can tap X inside of the highlighted sections. One of the first examples of this is at the very beginning after you rescue Alice from Roger Bacon on the train. You make your way through a dark marsh to some sluice gates. Here, if you can manage to do what will be your first real experience in using the Judgement Ring flawlessly, you will not just obtain the handle to the sluice gate, but you will receive a decent item. If you fail though, you miss out completely on the item. The item is a simple accessory that increases attack and can be bought soon after, but the principle is what I don't care for. Even for a veteran player, this can be surprising. I think at this point in the game, this should have been more of a tutorial for the Judgement Ring, allowing you to practice. The main place where you are punished severely for your failure is in the lottery game. Throughout your playthrough, you will engage with random NPCs that allow you to trade a lottery ticket for a chance to win a rare item. These rare items are the best in the game, and almost every lottery member holds some missable item. You get one try per lottery ticket, and believe me, these things are not plentiful. They're a finite resource that allows you to only play the lottery game a total of 23 times. If you aren't save scumming, then you are most likely going to miss out on some epic items. This just seems like an unnecessary punishment. The Judgement Ring is difficult enough as it is. Either there should have been triple or even quadruple the amount of lottery tickets found, or a way to purchase more if you were unsuccessful. Like number 7, Roger Bacon. Villains in RPGs can be pretty stale. Even ones that are beloved like Sephiroth from Final Fantasy VII or Ganon from the Zelda series are pretty standard when you sit back to think about it. What makes a truly great villain is one with a unique personality. Villains like Kefka from Final Fantasy VI, or the best of the best, Handsome Jack from Borderlands 2.
How's your day been, buddy? We haven't really talked much since I left you for dead. Hey, you think you'll freeze to death out there? Nah, probably not. Bandits will get you first. My day? Been pretty good. Just bought a pony made of diamonds. Yeah, because I'm rich. So, that's cool.
Roger Bacon isn't only a memorable antagonist, but one of the better ones I've experienced in RPG. From the first moment you meet him, he gives off an eerie charm that just sucks you in. I love this moment where he's casually walking down a train to slaughter dozens of Japanese soldiers, only to politely get out of the way of some passengers. In the first half of the game, he is more of an observer of the situation, as Dewey takes the stage. But his significance is obvious in the second half. For such a violent villain, he actually doesn't get involved with the fighting directly. He often has minions to do his dirty work. In fact, you're conflicted during the game as to his true intentions. Is he evil or not? But your confusion as to his true nature is squashed when you reach Kowloon Fortress, in what I can only describe as the most grotesque scene in the entire game. You see, Roger's been conducting experiments here on the locals. These experiments are messy, as he's been creating new human beings from parts of old ones. All of this is side content, but if found, you finally see the sick and twisted nature behind his gentleman-like exterior. All of this doesn't even take into account that he's part of the second biggest plot twist in the game surrounding his true identity. Dislike number 6. Party members take equipment with them. During your playthrough, unfortunately party members will be in and out of your party. This isn't a new thing. RPGs have done this since the dawn of time. but something that is irritating is that when a party member leaves your party for a set amount of time, any and all equipment they had on them is taken with them. This can be extremely irritating when it comes to the special accessories, especially the pedometer. You see, there's a merchant that follows you throughout the game called the Silent Merchant. When you first meet him, he gives you the pedometer. This device counts the amount of steps you've taken in areas where you can get into random battles. You can exchange steps like currency for rare items. Unfortunately, I often didn't have the pedometer on me because it was equipped to some character that wasn't in my party at the time. This wasn't a huge deal, but it was irritating enough to make the list. Like number 6, upgrading fusions. In Shadow Hearts, the main protagonist Yuri has a unique ability called Fusion. This transforms him into an elemental beast at the cost of sanity points. This transformation comes with increased stats and a unique skill pool. In order to unlock these fusions, you must defeat enemies with the associated element until you have gained a sufficient amount of malice. Once you have, you dive into Yuri's subconscious mind, represented as a graveyard, and fight the fusions. If defeated, you can now transform into them. There are 6 in total, with a 7th hidden fusion towards the endgame. The 6 standard fusions each have 2 upgraded forms, meaning that altogether you have access to 19 fusions. This is such a fun mechanic. It's exciting, almost like catching Pokemon. You can't wait to see what the light fusion looks like or what the wind fusion evolves into. Wait, are those breasts? Collecting malice gives more oomph to battles aside from just gaining experience. I wanted to unlock the fire fusion, but had struggled to find any fire type enemies in the early game. When you get to the smuggler's boat, you can run into a group of fire skulls. It was here that I decided to grind up my fire malice to the point where I didn't just get access to the fire fusion, but nearly got enough to unlock the level 2 fusion as well. The third forms are locked not just behind the required malice, but also some associated stones. I didn't particularly care for this, but it did act as a gatekeeper from a player just grinding out all the fusion levels in the early game, so I guess that makes sense. Dislike number 5. These cinematics look terrible. Now, before anyone says that this was an early PS2 title, so of course they look bad, I'd like to compare this to Final Fantasy VIII. Both seem to almost use the same engine and renders. Final Fantasy VIII's characters look fluid, their movements are motion captured, and look completely natural. Their facial expressions show emotion as many of us experience it. Shadow Hearts cinematics are just plain terrible. Yuri especially takes a major hit. When we first meet him, he's covered in a cloak tailing Roger. This is pretty cool. That is until he shows up looking like Encino Man. What the heck is this hair? Roger and Alice look alright, but their movements are so awkward. It doesn't help that the voice acting accompanying the cinematics is average at best.
Hey kiddo, what do you think you're doing? Don't! No!
What sucks is that the content of these scenes is great. I mean, Yuri gets his arm sliced off and reattaches it before punching his fist through Roger's face. Unfortunately, the quality of CGI distracts you from this as the character's movements and looks are uncanny and unnatural. I think the ending of the game with Alice and Yuri on the train works because of the lack of movement and the lighting, but aside from that, Shadow Hearts wears its low budget and 2000's Lost in Space CGI on its sleeve. Like number 5, the setting and horror theme. Horror RPGs are still rare to this day. It started with Sweet Home on the NES, and you've seen games like Parasite Eve, Darkest Dungeon, and Bloodborne carrying the torch. But I've never played an RPG like Shadow Hearts. The atmosphere and the environments are almost universally creepy. You have Zhaoyang Village, which is inhabited by cannibals. It's a foggy, rundown place with blood and bones scattering the ground. Or the Smuggler's Boat, which this entire section of the game pushes so well the isolation of being out in the ocean. The space is cramped and monsters abound. You even have more old school on the nose horror, like when you visit the Valentine Haunted Mansion and find it inhabited by vampire caskets. All of this was so unique to experience. The fact that it's set in real world locations like Prague, Shanghai, and London just round out an overall aesthetic that is both pleasing, familiar, and foreboding. The story also embodies the horror theme as much as the settings. I think the most potent story is the orphanage. When you reach London, you find a small group of orphans trying to escape the grasp of the local authorities. The reason for this is that they don't want to return to the orphanage as children keep disappearing from there. When you go to investigate, you find journals of children that suddenly go silent, many of them talking about being chosen for an experiment. Once you unlock the basement room, the seeker is revealed that the master of the orphanage is using the body and souls of the children to revive his long-lost mother. Another great story is investigating a possessed doll. I don't want to give this one away, but I felt heavy Resident Evil vibes during this storyline. The final horror element I want to recognize is the grotesque enemy designs, which take inspiration from body horror archetypes like Carpenter's The Thing or Alien. I mean, some of these are wild. You have these weird snail lady things that drag their bulbous bodies across the ground. You have headless women who stand on their hand and hold a pike skewering a brain between their toes. Oh, and these Silent Hill-like things. Don't forget the insane boss designs as well. Though the graphics in Shadow Hearts do the game no favors, the old grainy visuals help bring to life the rotting flesh and decaying bodies of the monsters you encounter. You know you've walked into something special when there isn't a single generic enemy in the game aside from some annoying bats. Dislike number 4. The Temple Ruins and Wugui boss fight. When you reach the Temple Ruins, you have to go through a long, irritating trial that splits your party up. During this section, it's almost like the game is pushing a certain item on you that negates instant death. The game was also signaling this earlier when you first encountered the Temple Ruins' final boss Wugui, but I didn't see the signs and ended up walking into this boss fight after a decently long dialogue scene and no save afterwards. Wugui cast instant death, and my entire party died. I hate instant death in games. It doesn't make a boss difficult, it just makes it annoying. Your only answer to this is dumb luck or equip this stupid item so you don't die. I restarted, changed my equipment, sped through the dialogue once more, and beat the boss. Thank you, Shadow Hearts. Like number 4, the Mind's Eye. Broken items in RPGs can be hit or miss. Make it too powerful and you make your game a cakewalk. Make it underwhelming and you might as well have left it out. But because of the genius Judgement Ring system, the Mind's Eye ends up being the single best broken accessory I have ever had the pleasure of using. You see, in normal battles, the Judgement Ring has multiple areas you must hit to attack. When you equip the Mind's Eye, your attack is doubled, but there's a catch. You can't see the areas you're supposed to hit on the Judgement Ring. You have to memorize where those areas are. So in exchange for precision from the player, you receive immense power. I built Yuri as a straight up attacker and spent a few battles memorizing where to hit on the ring. I eventually realized that it's a Y shape and that helped a lot. I got one for Keith towards the end and turned him into a beast as well, though his Judgement Ring is a little more difficult to pin down. It's mechanics working with items like this that convinced me that the developers of Shadow Hearts knew what they were doing. Dislike number 3. The character models have not aged well. Yes, this is an old game. It's also a fantastic game worth your attention, but let's not act like these game models look good. Yuri is alright if you can ignore the graphical seams of his clothes. Zuzen holds up as well, but all the other characters just look bad. The biggest offender is Marguerite. This looks so terrible. Like I said before, the enemy models, because of their zombie-like nature, end up getting a pass. But it's very difficult, especially with current emulation technology, to not put a huge spotlight on how poorly the graphics have aged. Like number 3, the final boss fights and the SP mechanic. The final boss of an RPG is a tricky balance, one that I would argue most games get wrong. It should be challenging, testing you on the knowledge of the game and your progression throughout. It also can't be too difficult, as multiple game overs during the climax of a game can destroy your entire experience. Of the 3 games I've beaten for this challenge so far, none have had a great final boss. Grandia 3 pulled a mechanic that the game never had me use before. Puzzle Quest had an insane and, in my opinion, unreasonable difficulty spike, and Stella Deus was just too easy. Shadow Hearts' final boss ended up being both the greatest victory lap of the game while also being one of the most challenging battles in the game. Let me explain how this worked. So throughout your playthrough, the characters have a red bar called the SP bar. This stands for sanity points and it goes down as you take damage. It's also required for Yuri's fusions. The consequence of running out of SP is that your character will go into a berserk state and will be uncontrollable. They'll attack indiscriminately and can even waste rare items. And speaking of rare items, you can get some that can heal SP, but they are hard to come by and you cannot purchase them. Ultimately though, the SP mechanic never really hinders you in most battles, as long as you wrap them up pretty quick. But then you reach the final boss of this game. The first battle is with Roger Bacon. He's difficult but not impossible, but then he starts using Holy Chest, which drains your SP. This elevates the battle as you not just have to damage him while managing your HP, you also have to ensure that your characters don't go berserk. Throw in an attack that can bring a character 1 health, and it's a bit of a nail biter, but it's nothing compared to the next battle. The final boss is God, go figure, and he doesn't mess around. He also uses the same attacks as Bacon while adding in a few of his own. I had to pull every trick in the book while avoiding mistakes in order to beat him. During my battle, I actually ran out of SP healing items, so I let Keith die and just focused on Yuri and Alice. Beating the Meta God was a truly satisfying experience that could only be topped by this game's bad ending, which isn't just canon, but also manages to be the better one of the two. Dislike number 2. Most fusions are useless. We have now moved into my 2 legitimate complaints about this incredible game. Every dislike before this was a minor inconvenience, but these next 2 stood out to me as glaring flaws. The first being that there's really no reason to use any other fusion than the fire fusion. Sure, you can build Yuri as a mage, and more power to you, but that isn't what is going to be the most effective build for your team makeup. Alice, Suzanne, and Hallie are all support mages, with Suzanne and Hallie focusing more on damage. Marguerite and Keith are your hybrid characters with good stats in all categories. Yuri technically can fill any gap in your party as each fusion comes with its own skill pool. For example, the water fusion can heal, but the only true gap you will ever need to fill is your damage dealer. Because of this, the fire fusion, with its superior stats and physical attack and possessing the only physical attack buffing spell in the game, is a complete no-brainer. I ended up using the wind fusion for mob clearing at times, and the earth fusion defensive capabilities could help you through some harder boss battles, but ultimately you just don't get enough mileage out of these fusions, leaving many of them to sit off on the sidelines collecting dust. Like number 2, the Judgement Ring. Let me paint a picture for you. It's the 2000s, and Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest have set the template for turn-based RPGs. You have your HP, you have your MP, you have physical attacks, and you have skills. There isn't a single turn-based RPG up to this point that hasn't used at least this basic framework. So how do you make your game stand out from the rest? Let's say you add a third bar that is tied to your character's sanity. Alright, that's good, but not enough to change the game, right? Well, what if we make every action, no matter what it is, have an interactive element? Well, RPGs have done that as well. Just look at games like Mario RPG, Legend of Dragoon, or Paper Mario. Then the idea hits. What if we take the internal RNG mechanic and make it external to the player? Give the player control over their fate. Let them be the judges. The Judgement Ring could have become just a hit the button mechanic, but it goes so much deeper than anything introduced by games like Paper Mario. There are several examples of this. We've already discussed one in the form of the Mind's Eye, which increases attack but makes the Judgement Ring invisible. Another way the ring transforms the turn-based battle system is in status ailments. Status ailments are mostly annoying. I mean, stone? Come on. But what if your skills could make a status ailment ineffective? What if you were such a good player that a debuff had almost no effect on you? Well, that probably won't happen here, because Judgement Ring debuffs are hard. But hey, theoretically it could work. One of my favorites is the debuff that makes the ring spin twice as fast. It always felt like an exciting challenge. That's what the Judgement Ring system does. It takes annoying mechanics and makes them fun. Like regular attacks. Usually it's just a one-button press action carried out by your character with a random chance to both miss or crit. The Judgement Ring puts the decision directly in your hands. I'd argue that the standard physical attacks are the funnest to pull off, as it requires multiple successful taps. Oh, and let's not forget the satisfying punch of every successful hit and the epic shattering of the ring upon a completion. Dislike number 1. The missable content. My biggest issue with Shadow Hearts is that it has so much random stuff all around, and if you happen to pass over it, there's a good chance that you'll never get it. Be it items, equipment, or even side quests, there are multiple points in the game where content is locked and you will never get to participate in it. one of these biggest walls in the game is accessing Shanghai. Every location in the first half of Shadow Hearts is completely cut off after the midway point. This includes an incredibly important item called the erotic book. Yes, it's an erotic book. If you don't get this item, then you miss out on some of the best endgame side content and items. The worst part is that none of this is ever telegraphed. If you're coming in blind or playing without a walkthrough, then what Shadow Hearts requires from you is that after every major and minor story scene, you must stop what you're doing, go back to every previous location, speak to every NPC, and check every previously inaccessible area. In order to unlock the endgame side dungeons, you have to read certain item descriptions. Who's really going through reading these? What this culminated in was me anxiously checking every damn nook and cranny of the game, obsessively speaking with every NPC, and feverishly saving to ensure that I'd missed nothing. And I still did. Like number 1. Now, if you are planning on playing this and have played through developer Saknos PS1 RPG Koldelka, then I suggest you turn off this video now. If not, then I'd like to tell you the single best part of Shadow Hearts. Alright, let's do it. Now, imagine for a moment that you picked up a rather obscure RPG called Koldelka and enjoyed James, Edward, and the titular protagonist Koldelka's adventures. They experience a slow but enthralling story as they unravel the mysteries of Nemitin Monastery. Later, you pick up a new title for your brand new PS2, Shadow Hearts. You pop in the game, and what do you know, it's based in mid-century Europe just like Koldelka. But that's not that surprising. A lot of games take place in our world. What is surprising is that it's a horror-themed RPG, just like Koldelka. You follow the protagonist Yuri as he irritatingly follows a mysterious psychic voice in his head. This voice leads him to rescue a girl named Alice and go off on a world-hopping adventure. Eventually, you end up in London, where you meet a normal-looking boy named Hallie. He has psychic powers and talks about his mother, who was taken to a mental hospital. Come to find out, the voice within Yuri's head and Hallie's mother are the same person, and so the two head off to the oddly dark and foreboding hospital to rescue her. You fight your way through Vatican priests until you reach a giant locked dungeon door. Hallie, desperate to see his mother, climbs through a vent and challenges Roger Bacon. And then this event happens. Yes, Shadow Hearts is a direct sequel to Koldelka. It was played perfectly. If you go into Shadow Hearts with no previous knowledge of Koldelka, you won't even notice the connection. But if you did play Koldelka, this hits home in more ways than one. The next location after the mental hospital is Wales and Nemitin Monastery, the very monastery from the first game. Here you'll find a lone grave with the name James O'Flaherty. As you venture inside the hidden basement of Nemitin, you find out that Roger Bacon, his actual name is revealed to be Albert, was responsible for the events that took place at Nemitin Monastery so many years ago. What an awesome reveal. And what a treat for those few who played and loved the original game despite the terrible and completely unfounded reviews. I myself couldn't get enough of this reveal and felt myself get emotional as my experience with Koldelka and Shadow Hearts crashed together in this beautifully underrated PS2 gem. If it's not obvious, I loved my time with Shadow Hearts. It's a short, well-paced adventure with likable characters, ingenious battle mechanics, and a whole lot of penny shots. In fact, Shadow Hearts is my first must-play game of this challenge. If you're following along and are thinking of playing a few titles I've reviewed, please start here. You will not be disappointed. And that's my review. I love this game so much that I jumped straight into its sequel, Shadow Hearts Covenant. Either that or Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance will be next, so be sure to subscribe to this and my other channel, Low Cloud and Gameplay. Bye!